So who is Servetus? Servetus is a scholar. His rival. He's basically, when you read his writings, he's even more bold and even more outrageous than Calvin. And he is one of the few, which really probably should get him some credit and respect, of his time, who read Quran and who read the Torah, and who knew the languages, all ancient languages, and who seriously thought about the nature of Jesus and God, and he read the comments of the Jews and of the Arab scholars about Christianity. He was probably one of the most educated men, maybe more educated than others, because others read things in Latin, and at best in Greek, and there are very, very few of those days who could read Hebrew, and especially who could read Arabic. So he was absolutely extraordinary scholar, and then that reading kind of influenced him. And when I see the summary of his writings, they do remind me of Arians, the Arian controversy of 450, which was a Christian debate, whether Jesus is more important and less important than his father. And Servetus actually goes back to that idea that Jesus is no more than a voice of his father. He was sent by God to earth to spread the message, but in a sense it's close to the Muslim interpretation and to the Jewish interpretation of the nature of Jesus as a messenger and as a prophet rather than God. And then he goes even further into what would be considered heresy, and that's also very similar to the Jewish critique and to the Muslim critique, the critique of the Trinity. Basically, the Jewish and the Muslim critique and Servetus's critique of the Trinity is the Trinity doesn't make any sense. Because if you believe in one God, how could there be one God in three faces? How could there be three? Why three? If God is one, why is there a Jesus who is also God? And then he's also at the same time, he's one person. How could that be the same person? And then the Holy Spirit. So from the point of view of Servetus, it's basically heresy, and it's basically paganism, that the Trinity. And he wrote letters like this to Calvin, saying that this is what he wrote to Calvin. Your gospel is without God, without true faith. You have there a three-headed predestined Trinity. For faith, you have deterministic dreams. So he calls Calvin's teaching deterministic dreams and a three-headed nonsense regarding the Trinity. Of course, this would make Calvin furious, absolutely furious. He also wrote to Calvin, disagreeing with his central thesis. He's saying that no one, God condemns no one. God does not does not condemn anyone. God does not predetermine anything. Only a person himself condemns it. He actually asserts something that Avicenna asserted, and Aristotle and many others, and the Arabs accepted that God, Islam accepts that God gave a human being a freedom of choice to be good or to be bad. And this is why he is condemned if he is not good. To say that it's all predetermined in advance is nonsense. And he says that openly to Calvin. Moreover, he goes to say even more things which are really early Christianity. He says God is love. Jesus is all about love. And you cannot have this kind of a strict God that predetermines everything in advance. If you think that there is no love and compassion, you don't understand anything about Christianity, he says to Calvin. You can, of course, imagine that Calvin would be totally mad when he would hear things like this. One more quote. Your God is a chimera of enslaved will. Chimera means nonsense, of enslaved will. A will that is not free, a will which is controlled and predetermined. In any case, now comes the bad part, which is that Calvin begins to set up a persecution of Servetus. Servetus is hiding. It's actually Calvin who writes to the Bishop of Lyon, and his book was published, the second book, with all these ideas, and he published letters to Calvin. He writes to the Bishop of Lyon saying, in your Lyon diocese there is this heresy, how could you do this? Can you imagine this? He is a leader of a Protestant church, and he writes to a Catholic bishop, go get this guy because he is a heretic. And then they do. They check it out, and Calvin sends a copy of the letters that Servetus published to the Bishop of Lyon so that they could verify, yes, these are the letters. So that is Servetus, because he published it under a pseudonym, a different name. In other words, he made everything so that it is revealed that it is Servetus who wrote these things and published these letters, and he does everything so that he's arrested. So Servetus runs away. He's traveling all over Europe trying to hide, and then he has some friends in Geneva, so he comes to Geneva thinking it's safe because there is no Inquisition in Geneva. And then he's recognized and he's seized, and then there's this famous trial in Geneva. Now Geneva cannot try non-citizens. All they can do is banish them. So it's already a violation of the law that they actually are trying him. And then there's the trial, and then there are investigations and all kinds of things. Calvin does everything to have Servetus condemned by burning as a heretic.